Hello, everyone, and thank you all for joining today's webinar. I'm your host, Karina Vidal, and I hope you're all excited for this webinar as we are because today we're joined by experts from StayNTouch, ReviewPro, and TravelClick. Our speakers will lay out a full and actionable game plan that will be implemented to improve your guest experience, reinforce your brand promise, and drive loyalty. So join me in welcoming our speakers. First up is Aldrich Shorts. He is a technical sales engineer at StayNTouch, skilled in creating uniquely engaging experiences across an expansive range of service needs and environments to assist hoteliers in revenue strategies via guest personalization. And Neil James, who is the VP of Global Customer Success at ReviewPro. He runs a worldwide support team dedicated to helping and educating clients on how to get the most out of their ReviewPro solutions to ensure hoteliers provide great experiences for their guests. And now, finally, Josh Graham, who's a true hotelier who's worn many hats. Josh is the regional VP of GSM at TravelClick. And Josh combines his love for marketing with a deep e-commerce expertise to help hotels engage with their guests in personalized ways to drive customer satisfaction and incremental revenue. So our speakers will be creating a wide range of strategies to provide you a solid game plan to enhance hotel recognition and guest loyalty. So today you'll learn how to capture and action on key guest data during the welcome and departure phase to provide a more personalized experience. Employ the latest in stay service recovery tools and techniques to exceed guest expectation and encourage loyalty. And use guest intelligent data to drive operational and service decisions within your property to improve the guest experience and secure repeat bookings. And then finally, choose a winning loyalty program that plays to your strengths and fits within your constraints and enables you to recognize and reward guests to increase repeat business. So we'll first start it off with how do we gather that data? We'll start off with Aldrich.
Thank you so much, Karina.
You're welcome.
So I'd like to start off by, first of all, saying an actionable game plan will start with welcoming your guest. I more so work in the PMS realm. So for your property management system, you'll want to start off engaging your guests with something informative. We like to start off with a pre-stay informative email that can be anything from your confirmation letter or an actual pre-stay email that will inform your guests of different things like details about the hotel, amenities around the hotel, different attractions in the community, options for dining, and different experiences in and around the hotel. Okay, that can be actioned from your hotel, from your property management system automatically. You can also engage or integrate with other systems like a CRM that will allow you to push out these different communications to your guests. In a modern PMS, you can also offer options like mobile check-in. This option will be important and valuable to you in gathering insightful information about your guests prior to their arrival. It's also ideal that you start with your guest probably at least 24 hours prior to your arrival so you can get a good idea of what their arrival time is. A good check-in email will gather information like the ETA to learn when the guest is going to arrive. And then you can gather other things like comments and preferences to add into the profile, to build out rapport with the guest. You can also offer additional things such as frictionless options for upgrades. This is a great way for a hotel to increase their ancillary revenue. You can offer options like enhancements to the stay, offer options such as enhancements, experiences, special things that you perhaps curate and create for your particular hotel. Okay. You can also give the guest freedom of choice to build their journey at your hotel, allowing them to focus more so on preparing for their journey, also allowing your staff to prepare for that guest who's going to be arriving at the hotel. So more efforts go into providing an overall amazing experience for your guest. All right. So continuing on from gathering information during the pre-stay phase of the guest, so prior to the guest's arrival, once the guest participates in actionable pre-engagements such as the pre-check-in, you've gathered valuable information there from the guests, such as, like I said, the ETA, preferences, different comments about their upcoming stay, also offering them options to enhance their stay. You want to go ahead and keep that guest informed, okay? A great system will automate some of those processes. So at the time that the guest is due to arrive or near the guest's arrival time, you want to be able to provide the guest with some additional details about their room, such as what their room number is going to be, provide them with any additional information about the enhancements or experiences that they decided to purchase or that they're interested in. You want to inform your guests of additional instructions about the hotel, elevators, important things to make everything very seamless as to their arrival process. You can also provide different options like mobile key, which provides a truly frictionless arrival experience for the guests to go straight to their room if they choose to, or engage with your staff at the front desk if you want to implement a different process there. Okay. Now, while we're speaking about this, we understand that this engagement is going to be basically mobile. Okay. You're sending out this information to your guests. The guest is participating in these different processes on their mobile phone or on a device that they'll be carrying with them, such as a tablet. You can also you also want to consider what mobility is. Okay. So if you're considering a PMS that will have these particular types of tools, you want to understand that mobility doesn't really mean doesn't literally mean mobile. Okay. Or you don't have to be tied to um, an app or an application. So we want the process to be seamless or web-based so that the guests will be able to access it from anywhere without the intention of actually downloading an app. If the guest, of course, we know is inclined to download an app, they're probably not going to complete the process, or more times than not, they're going to discontinue the process of actually going through it. So we want to make sure that that's going to be web-based so that the guests can easily access that and complete that process. Okay. We want to also prevent those downloads. We want to incorporate built-in security. So there are smart, intelligent systems that actually incorporate ID scanning and facial recognition to increase the security around the guests actually participating in this process of doing a pre-check-in, a mobile check-in. And you can also stay connected with that guest throughout their stay if you have something that's going to be able to engage with them outside of a mobile app. Okay. All right. To continue on here, we're going to just take a look at how we can utilize that data that we've gathered from that pre-engagement. Okay. So an intuitive PMS will automate some of those processes based on what they are. And we want to more so speak on those processes that are going to be repetitive, that you would probably want to, because of course we don't want to remove the human touch points in this process. Okay. So once we've gathered the ETA, from the ETA, we should be able to update an arrival time. Sometimes this process is going to be automated within the PMS. So it will also trigger auto assignment of your guest room. Okay. Also, remember, we're collecting preferences and comments. So based on those preferences, we can actually select rooms that are more so preferred by the guests. So we're not giving the guests any type of room other than what they originally desired. And then you can also activate auto check-in in some systems by having that auto assignment in place, as well as understanding what the ETA is. You can already have these things lined up for your guests ready to go once they actually arrive at the hotel. Okay. We've also gathered some preferences during this process. So with those preferences, again, we're using those to allocate different room types. We can also use those comments to provide the staff with useful information, perhaps prep the room or experiences for the guests prior to their arrival so that the guests can come in and already start experiencing their stay without having to worry about anything being set up, nothing being in place. Your staff is already well informed about what your guests' needs are. Okay. And automation should be an option, of course. Okay. We understand that automation can be very helpful to our staff, but we don't want to completely remove the human touch point. We still want our guests to be able to engage with guests. So all of these things are going to be optional. And it's a good idea to consult with your PMS provider on ways that you can actually blend the automation process with how your staff will interact with that guest to create a complete guest experience at your hotel. Okay. Next slide. I'm going to take a look at some of the benefits of mobile engagement. Okay. So we're going to see that you're increasing your ancillary revenue by offering those enhancements and additional options like early check-in, late checkout, of course, if you're engaging your guests post stay or during the end of their stay journey. Okay, you can also anticipate your guests' arrival and needs. You're going to be able to cut down on check-in times and stagnant lobby traffic by, of course, having some of those automated processes in place. You can also stay informed on getting information or updates directly to your staff based on what's being updated by the different processes where you're engaging your guests prior to their stay. Also provide the guests with personalized information or options to enhance their stay. This is a great way for you to, again, revolving back around to ancillary revenue, being able to personalize different things that you know your guest is going to be interested in. Okay. You can also collect safe, secure, and compliant data with the ID scanning as well as facial recognition if that's something that's incorporated into your process. All right. Next, we'll take a look at the data in action. For this particular example, we're taking a look at the Fontainebleau. Okay, so they wanted to modernize their particular technology stack. With the 1,500 rooms, they found that to be a bit of a dilemma doing that. So one of their goals was to modernize their guest experience as well as increase guest service levels. They were able to do that with using a modernized PMS, which is provided by StayNTouch, of course, the Rover PMS. And you can see the results of that. There was 140% return on investment in the first 30 days by offering out to their guests options such as pre-check-in that includes, of course, early check-in, engaging with their guests, understanding what their guests' needs are, offering different enhancements to the stay, such as experiences around the hotel, different options that you can actually purchase at the hotel prior to your stay, during the stay, and after, okay? As well as late checkout. There was also a 20 to 40% conversion, which is where guests opted into the process of pre-arrival, increasing anticipatory information for preparing for guest stays. And then we also saw improved guest reviews from this process. So guests were able to participate in this and they actually enjoyed the process. It was very frictionless, it was seamless as a part of their guest experience. So the hotel overall saw improved guest reviews. Okay. Next, we're going to take a look at post-stay and beyond, data that's collected during the checkout process and how you actually engage with your guests during that checkout process. All right. So when you engage with your guests at the end of their journey, you can have different options such as a checkout option. And this can be sent, of course, to the guest via email, and it's accessible very easily over a mobile device. You offer, of course, different options for checkout, very much streamlining the process of doing this and eliminating the hassle of checking out through a line, or even, as I've seen in most or a lot of cases with hotels, the printed bills under the door. This is a very easy way for the guests to be able to go through, review their bill, actually give feedback to the hotel, and actually engage with the hotel if there are any issues. All right. There's also post-stay engagement where the PMS can integrate with a CRM tool where you can actually send out information about the hotel, information engaging the guest in regards to surveys. You can utilize important profile details that you've gathered during the guest stay, prior to the guest stay, to pass on to the CRM tool for better marketing uses. Okay, you're able there to target the guest with state statistics to further personalize your reach and communication. And of course, engaging the guest allows you to understand satisfaction and improve upon that with insight and put that into actionable plans to improve your operations. Okay.
Right. Sounds good. So just a quick question, actually. In regards to the PMS, so there's an understanding that the PMS is gathering this data prior to guests arriving to the property. Mm-hmm. How can we use that data? Like how does that bring value to creating guest loyalty? Can you hit on that?
Absolutely. So you're already gathering information, of course, from the pre-stay. You're engaging with the guests. Your guests can offer you comments, also input preferences based on what you basically can customize. in that particular process. So having that feed into the guest profile, as well as the guest being able to update information like communication, their address, so on and so forth, you're actually collecting valuable information that you can pass on to a system like a CRM tool, to understand your guests better and actually create marketing and target your guests better with that information. So the PMS is basically keeping a record of all of that and passing it on, to an integration, perhaps to use it for better value in marketing.
Okay.
And retargeting your guests for future stays.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
Sounds good. So now let's talk a bit more about how we're going to use this data that we are capturing and the intelligence for operational and service decisions. Neil, if you could hit a bit more on that, that'd be super great.
Absolutely. Thank you, Karina. So in order to drive loyalty within your customer base, it's important to make sure that everything that happens at your hotel evolves around your guest, and that you put guest intelligence data at the forefront of everything that you do. This data can then be used to drive operational and service decisions, improve the guest experience, and ultimately secure repeat bookings. On the left here, you can see the front of the page of The Economist that was featured a while back. The Economist identified how the world's most valuable resource today has shifted from oil to data. Big data is the new currency, and it can be seen and used all around us. And for hoteliers, guest feedback becomes their new goldmine of data. The key here is that there is so much data available, it's important to find the right tools in order to be able to aggregate this data and be able to visualize this data in as clear as possible fashion, ensuring that there are no data silos. Tools that enable you to join the data of online reviews and guest surveys, whether they're in-stay or post-stay, provide a unique opportunity to analyze all the data all in one platform, enabling you to better identify which actions to improve guest satisfaction on property should be prioritized. Next slide. While there is so much data available to hoteliers, it's key to identify what are the areas that are most impacting the guest satisfaction at your property at this moment. It's important that at any time, effort and resource that is used to improve guest satisfaction is directed to those areas that are most negatively impacting guest satisfaction. As a former GM, I know that many times we think that we know what the issue is that's impacting guest satisfaction, and actually when we start looking at the data can tell us something different. Sentiment analysis is the tool within ReviewPro that it is applied to millions of reviews and survey responses to automatically identify the areas that require most attention. This ensures that you, the hotelier, can see specifically what are the areas that your guests are mentioning most when writing reviews or responding to surveys. But also, we have an algorithm to identify which of those areas are actually impacting the Global Review Index, which is ReviewPro's proprietary online reputation index. This means that you know exactly where you need to put your resource, your time, and your effort. Next slide. A study that was run by Cornell University using ReviewPro data and data from STR identified the true correlation on the impact of managing your online reputation and the impact this can have on your ability to drive rate, occupancy, and RevPAR. The study highlighted that a 1-point increase in a hotel's GRI can drive a growth of 1.42% in your RevPAR. Now imagine if you grew your GRI by 2 points or even 5 points. In addition, the Hotel Corallo in Sorrento, a ReviewPro client, implemented an in-stay survey, post-stay survey, and managed reputation through ReviewPro, and they've seen their GRI rise by 5.7 points in 3 years. And they have also been able to increase their ADR by 20%. Not a bad result, I'm sure you'll all concur. Next slide. The recent 2019 Hospitality Technology Sentiment Survey report identified that guest experience was the tech category that respondents will be looking to invest in most. So the guest experience area is the place where people are now looking to spend more and more of their technology dollars. And tech budgets are overwhelmingly on the rise for 2020. Wi-Fi, over 80% of the respondents put this as the top technology-enabled feature they always use when staying at a hotel, but also one of the main categories that cause the most frustration during their stay. So when looking to grow loyalty, this will be one of the things to bear in mind for 2020. Next slide. So as hoteliers become more and more adept to using the various technological platforms available to them to serve the guest, the question often comes up, can I reduce or remove the human touch point within the guest? Next slide. The answer is simply no. The key here is to adopt a mix of tech touch and human touch. This week, I've been in the Red Lion Hotel Conference in Las Vegas, and I had the pleasure of listening to Auntie Melchiori from the TV program Hotel Impossible speaking. And one of the messages that Anthony mentioned was that for him, one of the key things that hoteliers need to continue and make sure that is happening is that none of the staff members walk past a guest without greeting that guest, without asking that guest, is everything okay with their stay? Without asking that guest, is this something that could be done in order to improve their stay? Or without simply saying thank you to that guest for choosing to stay at their particular property. This is the human side that really, really matters. However, the deployment of in-stay surveys or a guest messaging tool are the technological touch points that many hoteliers have either deployed or are in the process of deploying to obtain feedback while the guest is on property. This obviously helps to increase those touch points from guests that maybe we don't have access to during their stay. And being able to do this and deploy this kind of technology, this helps to drive loyalty from the guests that you have in-house and ensures that you can turn around their satisfaction while they're on property. Next slide. The great thing with technology or guest messaging platforms enable us to reach out to those clients that we don't have the opportunity to do a touch point with, and also to reach those that would not usually complain face-to-face. Using these platforms can increase the amount of feedback we receive, making sure that we have the opportunity to deal with any issues before the guest leaves the property. It is a known fact that if a guest has a bad experience while on property, and this experience is turned around during their stay, the guest oftentimes will be more loyal to your property or to your brand. This particular example on the screenshot was of a guest who during an in-stay survey simply mentioned to the property that it would be good in the future to provide your guests with an additional fan in their rooms. The guest certainly wasn't expecting that the fan would be delivered while they were still in-house. This led to the guest leaving a very positive review on TripAdvisor and stating, "I would definitely stay here again." Now that's loyalty for you. Next slide. So data research that was carried out by ReviewPro identified two key points here. The first one was that guest satisfaction of customers who had a problem during their stay and had it fixed, the satisfaction of these guests increased by 7.75%. And yet those guests' satisfaction of customers who had a problem during their stay and did not have it fixed reduced by 4.3%. So therefore, being able to reach out to your guests during their stay and getting their feedback, but then making sure that your operation is ready to respond and carry out actions to fix those problems is really key. This will drive loyalty to your guests. This will drive repeat business. Next slide. So I mentioned briefly earlier about guest messaging platforms. As people become more and more attached to their mobile devices, they are looking for ways to be able to communicate with the hotel during stay via their mobile phone. Oh, and by the way, most guests these days are also not downloading hotel brand mobile apps like they used to in the past. Therefore, a messaging hub like the one that ReviewPro offers provides hoteliers the ability to offer guests a chance to communicate with them prior, during, and post-stay using the messaging channel of their preference, whether that is WhatsApp, SMS, WeChat, Facebook Messenger, or Telegram, just to name a few. Using the guest messaging hub, hotels can manage all those in the same interface, while also creating a knowledge base as seen on the right-hand side of the screen for the most common queries that are asked to simply simplify and speed up the process of responding to guests. Next slide. So this ensures that guests don't need to descend on reception to ask for towels, or to call reception to find out what time the restaurant opens for breakfast. They can simply ask through the messaging channel of their choice. Messaging, therefore, is the new way to communicate on property in real time. There's no new app that needs to be downloaded. It supports multiple messaging channels and provides the ability to create a knowledge base to simplify responses. Next slide. So the question is, can this be automated? And the answer is, well, yeah. So many times the queues that we know that are at reception are for queries, as I said earlier, about extra towels, ironing board, etc. But information is what drives guests these days, whether it be prior, during, or post-stay. So the information needs to be easily available to guests to help them have a pleasant and trouble-free experience. In many cases, we know that guests will state things such as, if I can't get the info I need, I won't reserve, or if I can't get the help I need, it will affect my satisfaction. ReviewPro recently worked with a couple of chains to get some statistics on the type of queries that they get. We had one chain of 30 hotels that stated 63% of their calls and emails are around the same 7 questions, 63% of all those calls and emails. And then with a chain of 800 hotels, 91% of calls and emails that are received at the property are around the same 18 questions. So therefore, organizations that can help their guests easily and quickly will reap the rewards of more satisfied guests and greater service efficiency. And this can be done through the deployment of a bot that can help to respond to many of these queries from the guests. And on that point, Karina, I'll hand it back to you.
Awesome. Great, Neil. I do have a quick question, just in regards to what you were referring to about moving on to the 2020 and the guest experience. What should hoteliers consider the most important priority in order to improve that guest experience for 2020? Like, what are the tips? What do you suggest?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is obviously make sure that you have a tool that is that you can use in order to be able to pull that data together and prioritize what you're responding to. This is one of the challenges that we see in the industry, is that people are trying to respond to everything and can't always get to everything. So, you know, it's using the tools that can identify which are the key priorities that are really driving guest satisfaction down, and then look for those automated tools that can help to increase that tech touch. You know, the deployment of something like messaging or a chatbot that can really reduce, as we saw by the numbers, you know, around 63 or even 91% of the queries that don't fall on reception, that don't come through the telephone. Well, those staff members can now start providing a great service to the guests that are checking in or checking out. So I think it's, you know, really looking at the technology, identifying the priorities to be able to really drive the guest satisfaction forward.
I mean, well, that sounds really great. So then just hitting on that, Josh, what recommendations can you suggest for hoteliers when they're trying to create this loyalty program? I know there's many options, many forms of doing it. Bigger hotels are doing, you know, astonishing things, but how can our hoteliers benefit from that and the data that's been gathered so far?
Well, it's a great question, Karina, and I think as we're going to talk about in just a little bit, our hotel partners need to evaluate the type of loyalty program that's right for them. As we're going to discuss, there's many different types of loyalty programs, and I'm actually going to posit a theory that loyalty goes beyond any particular program and is as much about culture and general hospitality practices as anything else at a hotel. So that when we're talking about this, you know, our philosophy is that loyalty programs are actually right for every hotel. We just have to examine how we think about loyalty programs. So My background is in the hotel operations side of things. I was a general manager at a property in here in Washington, D.C. before joining TravelClick, and have a deep wealth of experience there. And I think when we think of loyalty programs, we all too often become very focused on brand type loyalty programs, whether they are Hilton's, Marriott's, American Airlines, those kinds of programs, which have massive network effect, redemption networks, all of those kinds of things. But I would posit the theory that loyalty is much more basic than that. And as a hospitality provider, I think it behooves us to think of what really drives guests to be loyal to independent hotels, whether they are single properties, smaller groups, or mid-sized chains, and how that differs, and what we as hoteliers can do to drive those kinds of loyal behavior. And whether that is loyalty to staying at our individual hotel, or whether that might be something as simple as loyalty to a booking channel. In other words, we know that guests are not going to stay with us every single time they come to a particular property, but we want to make, or a particular area. They might sometimes stay at our property or sometimes stay uptown or in a different neighborhood. But that when they do stay with us, they book through our direct booking channels, which are the lowest cost of distribution, and where we have a greater opportunity to engage effectively with that guest rather than allowing them to go book on an Expedia, where we essentially turn that guest over to Expedia or whatever OTA that the guest is booking through. So that really is something that I think is worth thinking about. Now, as we go to the next slide, though, what you'll see is that generally speaking, there are three large buckets that loyalty programs can fall into. And hoteliers can sort of examine their unique selling proposition, examine the competitive set and the marketplace in which they operate in, and what they can do, and really figure out what makes the most sense for them. And by the way, some of these different types of programs can be combined. So certainly if you have something that is really geared towards a value add or rewards, it doesn't mean that you can't also offer surprise and delight type activities to your guests, but that you might have a little bit more structure. So as we go to the next slide, let's talk a little bit about surprise and delight. This is sort of what we see, or the bucket that we would put in most likely for smaller properties, individual hotels, small groups. It's sort of the least structured, fits perhaps the most well with a boutique type mentality. And I use the word mentality very specifically because one thing that I strongly believe in, and that I think I have some experience with, is that loyalty is not simply a program. If you approach loyalty strictly from a programmatic standpoint, where you're incredibly focused on what they need to do to earn something, what the process is for redeeming, you're missing some of the most critical aspects. I would argue that loyalty is actually as much about culture, is as much about the attitude that the entire hotel takes in order to get that guest to come back. A housekeeper who leaves a quick little note is helping to drive loyalty. We don't think of it because so often we get caught up in our day-to-day. Well, that's what housekeepers do, what they do. But housekeepers can do more than they do. Front desk teams. I'll give you a personal example of surprise and delight that absolutely drove loyalty from my part. I go to New York quite frequently for work. It's where Amadeus or TravelClick is headquartered, and I don't live in New York, but I'm there quite often. And so I'm there, fairly frequently. I was actually up for a weekend trip with my wife, staying at a property, and we were just there for one night, quick trip, friend's wedding. And we were talking as we were checking in about the fact that we weren't going to have time to go to our favorite bagel place that we like to go to. And my wife was rather upset that I hadn't planned things better, which is usually the case. And so we got back to our room later that evening, and there was a bag of bagels from our favorite bagel place and a note from the front desk clerk saying, heard you guys weren't going to be able to get these, wanted to make sure you experienced it. It was incredible, blew me away, and I've been in the industry for 20-something years. But keep in mind, as simple as that sounds, you actually have to have an empowered people culture. Your team members have to feel comfortable doing those kinds of things and knowing that they don't have to go through a big process. So while this can be very costly and very informal, it really gets to the core that to have an effective loyalty program, it needs to be part of the culture as much as anything else. So as we go to the next slide, we'll see a slightly more structured approach, what we often call value add rewards. And this is where, you might have a larger group. You want some more structure to your loyalty program, but you don't want to necessarily have the formality of points. Perhaps you have a larger number of properties, but they're dispersed very broadly from a geographic sense. And there's any number of different reasons that points don't make sense. But you want to make sure that you're encouraging cross stays. You want to make sure that you're rewarding guests who stay, at maybe one property more than once or whenever they're in that area. So whether it's doing things like driving upgrades, amenities, late checkouts, all of these kind of different things, encouraging them to use food and beverage outlets and that kind of stuff. These are all things that value add rewards can really help. And then also make the guest feel like they're getting something in return for their loyalty for your property. And there's any number of examples of these kinds of programs out there. We work with any number of groups to provide these kinds of programs as well. And then finally, as we go to the next slide, you'll see sort of the last bucket of loyalty programs, which this could have been split up into two slides, I suppose. You have cashback and points, and there's a couple different points-based programs out there. Companies that enable hotels to benefit a little bit from the network effect, give a immediate sort of reward to the guest in the form of cash back. And those can be very useful for, again, certain environments. And then, of course, you have what we might think of as the more traditional points-based program, where based on either the number of the dollars spent or the number of nights spent or the number of stays, you can progress through various tiers. I won't go into much detail because I'm sure that most everybody on the call belongs to at least one of these programs, either within our industry or somewhere else. So these programs can be costlier, but if you do have a larger portfolio and you meet sort of certain geographic dispersion requirements, I would say these points can be extremely powerful and really help to drive that kind of loyalty. Okay, so as we go to the next slide, Karina, I think we get into the end and some of our takeaways. So I know, Karina, I'll pass it back over to you.
Thanks, Josh. So I do want to get into the takeaway, but before that, I know there's this question that many people tend to ask each other, and is in regards to loyalty. And I know when we hear loyalty, like I said before, we're talking about the big brands, but some people might not see the value of loyalty programs, and some might even think that it may not be feasible for them because it depends on the number of keys that they have or the fact that they need to be part of a well-known brand. Do you think, in your experience, is that accurate? Is a loyalty program for a smaller boutique hotel or a hotel that's not related to a well-known brand, is it something that can still be accomplished?
Karina, absolutely. And that's a question that I do hear all the time. And I end up talking to our partner hotels about quite a bit. I think that if you step back and don't think about loyalty strictly in the context of points and tiers and structure, and you have to have all of these different stays to get these things, then absolutely there is a benefit for every hotel to think about how they drive loyalty and to think about the type of loyalty program that makes sense for them. There are many hotels for whom a formal points-based loyalty program makes absolutely no financial or operational sense, and that's fine. One of the beautiful things of this industry is that hotels come in so many different shapes and flavors and sizes, and it is not one size fits all. I think even if you look at the big brands, like you take a Marriott, for example, which has 30 something brands, they're trying to touch into all of these different things. So certainly for that individual property, yes, whether they worry about the workload, the financial cost, there are some kind of different things that they can benefit from if they put the right loyalty program in place. And as I'll talk about a little bit in the takeaway, there are some key prerequisites that I think that hotels need to think about when they do this, but I'll save that for that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Josh. So I just want to let everyone know we are opening up the audience Q&A after this takeaway slide. So if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, anything specific to loyalty, gathering data, or even how to implement it, feel free to write your questions in the chat box and we'll answer them accordingly based on the order they were received. So while you guys are writing up your questions, I do want to hit in these takeaways. I know we spoke about a lot of things, talking about the beginning journey and the end journey of your guest and how to stay in communication with them post their stays. So Audric, if you can take us first, bring us right back to the beginning of this data and let us know what's the most important takeaway you suggest that our hoteliers should really keep in mind.
Absolutely. So, basically engaging your guests ahead of the arrival to provide a more enlightened experience. I think this is pivotal. It's, you want to invest in a PMS that's basically like I have here, infused with features that promote this engagement, whether that's going to be pre-stay, post-stay, during the actual stay. This will allow you to basically take that data and blend it with both automation and human touch points to provide your guests with an overall amazing experience at your property.
Awesome. And Neil, can you talk a little bit more about how we can keep our guests engaged while they're on the property?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, I think, the key thing is increasing the touch points while the guests are on property through in-stay and messaging, and remembering that this touch point and engagement will impact their experience while they're on property, impact their loyalty to your property, but also it could get onto online reputation, either positively or negatively. So it also drives, the possibility of increasing your bookings online or having an impact on that.
Awesome. And now, Josh, if you can take us now to how we can stay in touch and stay engaged and really create that loyalty program that you think will be suited for each hotelier.
Absolutely. And by the way, I love the casual stay in touch pun. As a fan of any good dad joke or pun, that was it was intentional, but that was very smooth. So I think that no matter the type of loyalty program that you are looking to implement, the key prerequisite is having good data, understanding who your guests are, what their preferences are, what their value is absolutely critical and key. And at the end of the day, in order to have that data and to have that data be actionable across the entirety of the hotel, you have to have a powerful CRM system. So both Aldrich and Neil talked excellently about engaging guests ahead of arrival, understanding their stay, getting that data, engaging with the guests during their stay and soliciting the feedback. And absolutely that is critical. And what is even, if you'll forgive me, perhaps as critical or even more, is taking that data and then having it together, because data that lives in silos in different places either cannot or will not be effectively actioned in a hotel environment. So if you want to take that data and make it useful, which is absolutely critical to driving a successful loyalty program, whether it is the least formal surprise and delight to a hugely complicated and fanciful points-based system, you have to have a strong CRM system working to help you organize that data and spread that data throughout the hotel. Because if you have all of that data, but it's only accessible by a marketing team or a revenue management team, you've failed. If that data is the front desk can get what they need out of it, but the marketing team can't send out segmented emails, you've failed. So that, I think, is my takeaway, having the right data and having it accessible and actionable.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you so much. So there is a question that did come in. I think everyone can touch on it. But one of the question asked if either products can connect to Opera. So Audric, you can start it off, and then Josh and Neil, you guys can also chime in.
Absolutely. So wonderful news. We do integrate with Opera. We have the StayNTouch overlay product that will allow you to both utilize the mobile engagement with not only the pre-stay, pre-check-in, but also the checkout. So that'll basically enable your hotel to increase your ancillary revenue by offering those upgrades, upsells, and experiences during those processes. But you can also incorporate other touch points such as self-service kiosks and a simplified overlay for the PMS engagement. So yeah, we absolutely do integrate with Opera.
Yeah, this is Neil. So we work with thousands of clients right now where we receive guest data, both for in-stay surveys and post-stay surveys, in order to be able to send out the surveys and take the information of that guest profile and understand whether they're a corporate client, leisure client, and then actually drive the survey based off of the data from that PMS file provided by Opera. So we absolutely receive the data in order to be able to deliver those surveys.
Great, awesome. And Josh, if you can chime in so we can get a close.
Sure. From the TravelClick perspective, we can absolutely connect to Opera to both pull and push back data. Of course, we'd rather connect to StayNTouch, but we can do both. And we actually also can integrate with ReviewPro as well for survey data and working with them as well. So we have a broad range of integrations available, including Opera.
Okay, awesome. So I have another question that just came in. I think, Neil, you'll be able to answer this one a bit better. So in time of where digital and automatic processes remove touch points from hospitality, how do you ensure you're meeting guests' need while they're on the property and gain their loyalty?
Yeah. So I think the key thing, what we identify with the in-stay surveys and the touch points that we provide is obviously making sure that you're getting very quick actionable data, right? So what you want to make sure is, first of all, that you're sending out a simple survey that's one question, just asking, how was your stay? Is everything okay? Is there anything that you need? And then based off of that, make sure that you've got the operation in place to be able to respond really quickly and turn that action around if required. The other thing as well is, when talking about expectations, you have to think about this from prior to the guest arriving and how they go through the booking process. And a lot of that is done through online reviews, right? So when hotels are responding to reviews, they need to think about the future guests when they're responding to this and make sure that they're setting the expectations of the guests that are reading the reviews within those management responses. So when they're answering questions that guests raise in the reviews, make sure they're responding to those in a way that is setting expectations for the future guests so they know when they come to the property what to expect, what the cost of parking might be, or breakfast, or the busy times for breakfast, etc., so that people know this before they get to the property, and obviously their expectations are set.
Okay, awesome. Sounds good. And I have a question that I think this would be geared more towards you, Josh. Maybe if you can answer this question, but it's a bit stacked. But someone has asked that they work with a very small team where everyone has to wear many hats, and that's to say that they don't believe they have the time to do a loyalty program any justice, even if there will be any financial gains. How would someone like this person implement a loyalty program? And is there any way that they can first test the waters by starting some type of before committing to something bigger?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're a smaller property and like so many hotels being asked to do more with less in today's tough budget environments, you need to look at two things, I think. One goes back to what is the right type of loyalty program for you. Is it, it may not be a large, complicated program. It may be something that is simple. And then the other question is what, although I would presume that somebody who may not have a large number of people resources may also not have a huge budget, but how can you use your budget smartly to take advantage of automations, to take advantage of a platform that can help you do more with less, so that it can allow you to seem as if you have all of these people doing this automation, when in fact that automation is just happening automatically in the background. There are also things that often I find the terms artificial intelligence or machine learning are overused in our industry, especially by people like myself who admittedly want to sell things to you. But if the right provider will have smartly integrated machine learning and artificial intelligence into their platform in a meaningful way to drive revenue as well as operational efficiencies.
Awesome. And this will be the final question we will have time to take in, but it is in regards to pre-stay. So Audric, I think this would be better suited for you. And the question is, what if your PMS does not have pre-stay and post-stay mobile engagement tools, like mobile check-in and check-out? What other options are there?
So, as we've heard several times now in the webinar, it should be considered that a hotelier will have an intelligent technology stack. The PMS can integrate with intelligent tools such as a CRM that will allow them to basically engage with the guests with a pre-stay, post-stay email, providing them with valuable information about the hotel, perhaps even engaging with the guest in that particular way. There are several that will integrate with StayNTouch specifically. We also have a way that you can integrate a mobile engagement tool specifically, which is a product that we provide that will actually allow you to engage and also do the pre-check-in that way. So if you don't have StayNTouch, you can actually engage with your guests and invite them to do the pre-check-in, collect prepayments, engage with them via text message, and stay connected with your guests both pre and post stay. So there are other ways that you can actually engage with your guests if you have an intelligent technology stack that's well integrated with other products such as CRMs and a mobile engagement platform.
Okay, sounds great. And I know I said this would be the last question, but I just got one more final question that came in. And I think all you guys can actually chime in on this one, but it says, how do you train your staff to think loyalty? As you mentioned, this being important, what have you seen work well? So Josh, if you could take that, and then Neil, and then Audric, and then this would definitely be the final questions, everyone.
So when it comes to training your staff and what works well, I think that it starts with empowering your guest contact team members. All too often, the people that are in some ways the most critical to those guest experiences are often the people that work the hardest and receive the least amount of pay. So making sure that those team members are both empowered to do the right thing and rewarded when they do is absolutely critical.
Yeah, and I think from a ReviewPro perspective, when we work with hotels, I couldn't agree more with Josh. I think it's a case of, it's really key to make sure that you set the right culture within the organization, that the staff members are part of every, decision making that's going on, but also key data points such as metrics are explained not only at executive level, but at the team members level, and making sure that everybody knows what impact hitting those metrics has, and what impact it's actually having on the guest experience. And if they see that they're part of that change and they're part of that improvement, their motivation goes up, and obviously you hope they move into management positions in the future, well empowered with information to be able to move forward.
Awesome.
Right. So I would have to agree with both of you gentlemen. I've personally seen, working in the hospitality environment, specifically in hotel management, empowering and enabling your staff to feel that they can act and participate in the process of making sure that your guests are satisfied without feeling like they have to get the approval. That goes back to the empowerment. Definitely goes a long way. Being able to immediately address things, being able to immediately participate in that process of doing things for your guests that will tie into loyalty is definitely important. Being able to utilize your technology, your integrations to utilize valuable information such as profiles, information that comes from your CRM or that's communicated to your CRM, definitely allows you to enable use that valuable information to curate an experience that's more satisfactory for your guests, turning back to loyalty.
Awesome. Sounds great. So we do have a few questions that did come in, and we will reply to you individually through emails. But I do want to let anyone know, if you have any more questions, feel free to send us an email at info@StayNTouch.com. We'll also route or direct your questions to the appropriate company if it's something very product specific. And just as a reminder, all of this recording and the PowerPoints will be shared within 24 hours. So please be on the lookout for that email tomorrow at exactly 11 a.m. Share this PowerPoint and the webinar video on demand with your team is definitely a good tool for you guys to use and speak about and use in trainings. And once again, thank you all so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule for joining this webinar. I hope you guys found it super useful.